joining us will be Mr. Brett Kane. He's the president of Citrix Online Division. He got a bachelor's degree in marketing from New York University and is now an industry veteran with 22 years of experience in software sales and marketing. Mr. Kane was the vice president of worldwide territory sales and vice president of worldwide indirect sales at OpenWave Systems. Mr. Kane also held sales director positions at Clarify Incorporated, where he started his channel business and achieved a $30 million run rate. In August of 2003, he joined Citrix Online as Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales. Thus far in his time at Citrix, he has successfully developed a strategy for worldwide enterprise sales and alliance partnerships and has substantially increased bookings and commitments for the company's flagship products. Tonight, Mr. Kane is going to share with us his expertise in what is the same and what is different about enterprise software startups. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, hi, good evening. Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and it's great to see all the people here. When we have a meeting at Citrix Online, we get a full house because I sent the email, but in this case, this is all your personal time, and I appreciate everybody taking the time, come and have a listen. I'll do my best to not only provide you with an overview of what I think is interesting and relevant about the enterprise software market, but also answer your questions that you may have. And so let me take you through a couple of thoughts and concepts. I'm going to give you a brief overview on the agenda and then take you through some thoughts and concepts. First of all, I want to share with you some premises and introduction to the market. I don't know how many people here are familiar with the enterprise software market, so I want to give you a little bit of perspective on it and as well a little bit of historical perspective. As was stated in that very welcome introduction, I've been in the market, in the software market in the enterprise space since 1981 after graduating out of NYU. And so I immediately started out of university in the computer field and selling in the broad enterprise market, initially selling on Wall Street to large companies like Chase Manhattan Bank and Bankers Trust and other companies such as that, and then progressed my career through the years selling and living in Europe and finally moving here to Santa Barbara with my family about 4.5 years ago to join Software.com, which many of you know was another local success story, which subsequently merged with Phone.com and became OpenWave. And so some historical perspective I think would be really valuable for the team. And it leads all towards what we do at Citrix Online, which is software as a service. And that's a new dynamic that's going on in the market that I think is very interesting and a very strong, compelling opportunity as we go forward into the next phase of the enterprise software marketplace. All that is interesting, but if you're not creating value for your customers, you have pretty much zero chance of success. And so helping you understand how to create value and how to enter a marketplace is really key. And instilling your customers' support and strength in your value proposition is ultimately what will drive your success in the business as you go forward. And I'll share with you some thoughts and ideas and some success stories around that. And as you create value in your business, you have to create alignment and process and accountability in your company. And without those key components, you're going to have dissension in the ranks, you're going to have arguments across the organization, and eventually that will bring your company down. And so being able to create alignment and accountability and process so that you can serve your customers with that value proposition, it becomes more and more important as you get traction in the market and as you build success. When I typically talk to sales organizations or I speak to the company, I really like to focus on leadership. And so I just want to share with you some thoughts and ideas on leadership, because in my view, leadership is key. Regardless of the role you play in the organization, your ability to create leadership and to drive forward whatever your specific responsibility is, it has nothing to do with your title. It has to do with your ability to respect and treat people in the organization and help them understand what your value is as you go forward. And then I just have a few closing comments, and then we'll take your questions. When I think back, and in fact, when Klaus and I were driving over here this evening, I was sharing with him a couple of comments about my past. And I've been with startup companies that have run out of cash. I've been with startup companies that have been acquired. I've been in very large companies with 2,000 or 3,000 employees. I've been in larger companies with 20,000 or 30,000 employees. I've been in companies with a couple of hundred employees. So I've seen this wide spectrum. In fact, when I joined Expert City, which became Citrix Online, one of the interesting things about my background was, up to that point, every job I had had since 1988 ended in a merger and acquisition. Okay, and now with Citrix acquiring Expert City, my track record is complete. It continues, and it continues to go forward, because we were acquired in March of this year and became Citrix Online. But fundamentally, the compelling business drivers haven't changed in all that time. Since 1981, the compelling business drivers in the enterprise software market haven't changed. And so the fact that we've gone through a whole series of upheavals in different technologies or different introduction of computing, laptops such as I'm using here in front of you didn't exist when I started selling in the marketplace in 1981. But despite that, my premise is, and my proposition to you is, that the business market hasn't changed. The customers are still looking for the same fundamental things that they were looking for, 20-odd years ago when I started. And fundamentally, they're looking for ways to continue to streamline and automate and manage their business so that they can create value for their customers. The big challenge is, how do you do that as a business, as a software company, and how do you do that in a cost-effective way while you're creating value for your customers? And my premise also is that there are still enormous opportunities to continue to do this. Whether you have new ideas or you join a company that's trying to do it with their ideas, there are great opportunities in the market to expand solutions and change the way customers do business in the market today. So startups and existing companies pretty much operate in a similar way. The difference is it's all about cash. And one of the things that Klaus will share with you, if you have an opportunity to speak with him, is when they started the company, it was all about cash. When they had cash, they could invest more. When they had cash, they could hire more people. And if they followed the cash, then they understood, in fact, where they were relative to their plan. And every time they sold a new customer, acquired a new set of customers, they could then make decisions on what they wanted to do next. But they had a plan, and they understood what they wanted to do next. So when the cash became available, they could then take the next step and continue to build the business. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to work with Klaus and the other founders of Expert City and the rest of the organization, because they had a fundamental vision and understanding of what they wanted to accomplish. And my job is easy, because I get to build on what they built for 5 years before I got there. And my opportunity is to build on the great value that they created in the marketplace with great products, with great customers, with a strong business model that I'll share with you in a few minutes. And my ability is to come in with my experience and just help execute that just a little bit better and create a little bit more value and create that alignment I was talking about a few minutes ago. But these are very complex issues, especially when you're growing or you're part of now a publicly traded company, which we are. There's a lot of complex issues in the market. It's not just about cash anymore, right? There are market risks, there are technology risks, there are security issues in the market that didn't exist before. We all thought that once we got through the year 2000 that everything would be fine, but that just created a whole new set of issues for us. The dot-bomb environment created a set of paranoia among venture capitalists, where they didn't want to invest for a number of years after the dot-bomb environment happened. So those are all very, very complex and difficult issues to manage around. And anybody entering the market has to figure out, how are you going to navigate through those complexities in the market? Scaling is another, of course, issue that every company faces. How do you find the talent and the resources in order to build your business? If you're making money and you have the ability to hire new talent, where do you get that talent? When you're in an environment like Santa Barbara that has enormous housing costs, how do you attract and retain employees to come in and want to stay here rather than go up to the Bay Area or go to Montana or go somewhere else, right? These are very complex issues that you have to manage and you have to think about. And your ability to attract and retain your employee base is fundamental, because that is in fact your resource. That is your resource that enables you to be successful in the market. Your people are everything. They are everything. And if you don't have your people, you won't survive. And a successful company, in my opinion, understands how to build that from the people to the software to the value proposition, and then determines how to scale it up and how to really create a business growth engine. So I thought it'd be interesting to give you a little perspective and take you through a little bit of what's happened and how we got here. And for those of you that have studied computers and the history of computing, please bear with me for a second. So in the 50s through the 70s, and even frankly when I started in the early 80s, mainframes were pervasive. They were pretty much the way business was done. And it was pretty much dominated by a handful of vendors. And the environment, the hardware and the operating system, which was called MVS, right? That was all tied together. It was integral. It was a solution. And IBM came in and you took millions of dollars and gave it to IBM and they brought a bunch of people to your site and they had raised floors and it was really cold and all the things that go with that, right? And that was pretty much the computing environment. But it was limited to only a handful of companies that could afford those millions and millions of dollars in upfront investment as well as ongoing investment in order to support and maintain it. But the business drivers were all about running the business. Back office, financials, airline reservation, right? All the transactional part of the business, banks, all the parts that actually, drive the business, drive the money, enable a company to support and manage their business. And I digress. I should remember I'm in a university and large research projects as well. And then in the 70s and the 80s, companies like Digital Equipment and Wang and Data General came on the scene and they said, you know what, we can build a smaller departmental sized computer that can do a lot of the things these mainframes do and do it a lot more cost effective. And do it in an environment that may be departmental oriented or may be across the business. But they were pretty much proprietary systems and they were pretty much doing dedicated functions that the mainframe used to do across the business, now doing for specific departments. But this became an interesting, compelling opportunity because a business leader who had budget and had power could now all of a sudden make a business decision around technology that he couldn't have made 10 years before because he didn't have the authority, the strength, the financial wherewithal, or the resources to drive forward to solve his business problem, his or her business problem. And so this dynamic in the marketplace enabled many, many people before that didn't have access to computing resources all of a sudden to have access to computing resources. But the business drivers remained relatively straightforward. I have a business problem I want to solve, I have money I can solve it with, and now I have access to resources I didn't have before, namely these companies called Wang and Data General and Digital, that could come in and help me solve that business problem. And these companies became multi-billion-dollar companies as a result of that. They, in fact, were part of the reason that IBM almost failed, because IBM didn't see this coming and didn't react until Lou Gerstner came in and pulled them out of it. But this went on for years and years and years, and they disrupted the market at the time and created a huge, compelling opportunity for their customers. The client-server environment, which a lot of us are familiar with because either we grew up in it or we've learned a lot about it or we still use client-server applications, was this idea that clients that ran on desktops or ran on servers or ran on a combination of servers and desktops were starting to thin down. Okay, I was in the market at the time, in the early 90s, where we had these large applications that were running on desktops and starting to run on laptops. They were very large, and customers are saying, I want something a little bit smaller. I want it a little more reactive. I'd like to do some things that I really can't do in your environment. And so some of these fat applications were starting to thin down, right? The beginning of the thin client discussions. And there was also a real need for this idea of cross-functional automation. Because in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of talk about the office of the future, office automation, word processing. The PC came up during that time frame. The IBM PC, in fact, I should have mentioned this. I was selling to Chase Manhattan Bank, and I remember the first time the vice president of information technology for the bank, the guy had a $200 or $300 million IT budget. He was so excited because he got an IBM personal computer. He got one of the first IBM personal computers that was ever shipped by IBM. And that was a great moment, because the bank now said, I can now bring computing to the desktop. And in the marketplace, small and mid-sized businesses started to deploy applications that before they couldn't afford to deploy, because why? They couldn't afford those mini computers by those other companies. But now they could. They could go out and they could buy a Windows machine, or they could buy a small Sun Solaris server, and they could put an application on it that they could run their business off of. And this, again, distributed computing out to more and more people across the organization. Electronic mail started to become more pervasive in corporations. Those of us that have been in the computing business, since I walked out of college, I've had access to email my entire career. I didn't have access to email outside of my company until probably 1990, 1992, right, when the internet started to take off. But I always had access to email. But that's a relatively small number of people. The people in the computing industry, the people in the university environments had access to email. But a very few number of people had access to these technologies. Client-server started to change that. The internet started to change that. And enable people to broadly distribute applications. Citrix came on the market, where Citrix enables server-based computing to be distributed to many, many people in a centralized, managed way. This became another linking out to distributing computing. But the business driver remained similar, right? Software becomes a driver to enable the business to invest in information technology, what now as a competitive advantage. If I can implement a back office system that allows me to mimic the way my customer wants me to do business because the software is configurable, I can now do business in a way that my customer wants me to do business, and IT becomes a competitive advantage. Or in a call center, if I can treat my customers the way they want to be treated, if I can take their call and know who they are when they call me, right? How many of us have been frustrated by that experience? Still, today, you call, you enter in your account number, you pick up the phone, you talk to them, and they say, "Can I have your account number, please?" It's like, don't you know what? I already gave it to you, right? The companies that have figured out, "Hi, how are you? Can you please just confirm your address?" Okay, they already know who you are. Already your guard goes down and you're at least willing to talk to them. The other scenario is, I just gave it to you, why don't you know who I am? So IT as a competitive advantage became a key driver, and it started to fund and fuel the idea that by investing in technology, companies could get ahead. But it was a little bit of a panacea, because the dot bomb caused people to lose sight of the value of profitability. So any good idea all of a sudden was funded because people thought, oh, IT is a competitive advantage. I can go in, I can throw a lot of money at it. I can just grow at any cost, growth at any cost. Those of us that had been in the business for a while kept stepping back and saying, this doesn't make any sense. Companies that took 8 and 12 quarters of profitability before they could go public could now go public in 6 or 9 months with no profit, right? And eventually, the pundits were right. It was unsustainable. And so it all blew up. And when it blew up, a lot of people, certainly in the computing business, were out of jobs. A lot of people in a lot of other markets were out of jobs, okay? And I think people had to stop and reflect and rethink, how did we want to use information technology, and what was really the compelling business driver? Distributed workforce became more important. I was talking about enabling people here in Santa Barbara. One of our core businesses is enabling people to do work over the internet from anywhere in the world. It's called Go to My PC. Some of you may have heard of it, right? From anywhere in the world, I can access a PC in my office through a web browser and do my work as though I'm sitting in my office. Klaus likes to say it's like being there. The computing experience is literally like you're sitting in your office, but you're not. You could be in an internet cafe in France and have full access to your computing resources. So this idea that now I can have computers anywhere, anytime, you see people running around with, BlackBerries. Those of you maybe watching me up front saw me, doing it before. Laptops, internet browsers, all this capability. Now what do we do with it? How do we apply it to the business? That challenge is the same as the challenge of selling to the vice president of Chase Manhattan Bank. How does information technology affect and enable the business going forward? The issue now is, because of the dot-bomb, companies spent millions and millions of dollars investing in technology that went nowhere. It became shelfware. And the result of that shelfware is companies became gun-shy. And they didn't want to invest in new initiatives or new technologies, so they went back to things they thought were relevant to their business or people could justify as impacting the business. So I'm going to invest in something that enables me to get closer to my customer. Or I'm going to expand my enterprise resource management back office to ensure that I can do more effective billing. So running the business became a very important part of the information technology flow. But investing in growing the business took a back seat. Software as a service today, in my opinion, is changing that dynamic. What is software as a service? Software as a service is companies such as Citrix Online and others, and I'll show you a quick list in a second, are delivering software over the internet without any infrastructure investment on the part of the customer. It's essentially a pay-as-you-grow strategy. A customer can start with one license or one user, and they can add one at a time forever. And they don't have to do anything other than pay that monthly or annual subscription and have complete access to fully functioning applications that just a few years ago you had to install, on a big fat server somewhere in your IT infrastructure. And once you install that software, like a CRM, a customer relationship management system from somebody like a Siebel or Clarify, where I came from, you had to have people that could support it. You had to have IT and infrastructure people that knew how to manage it, how to configure it, how to solve the problems. Now, all of a sudden, as software as a service, all of that running the infrastructure is on the part of the service provider. So Citrix Online, our business is keeping our data centers up, running our network, ensuring that customers have access to our applications, and ensuring that availability is a key part of what we do every day. We show up every day and we focus on ensuring customers have access to our applications. And it's not just us, there's companies like Salesforce.com, and maybe you've heard of them as well, very successful in the sales automation market. They do the same thing. Complete access to Salesforce capability over the internet for a monthly fee. And the business drivers that are driving this is what? Distributed workforce again. I want to be able to enable my people regardless of where they are. I want to give them the same functionality regardless of where they are. And if they have a broadband connection, whether they're in their home or they're on a LAN or on a WAN, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore. Okay, that's the great thing about the power of the internet, right? I can do my job anywhere in the world. And because these applications are now available to me anywhere, I can be sitting in Beijing and pull up the Salesforce. We use Salesforce to track our sales. I can see what's the pipeline look like, how many opportunities we have, what's closed, what's still open. I can have a complete view of the picture, and I don't have to do anything other than log on to a web browser from anywhere in the world. As long as I know my username and my password, I'm in. And so this is changing the way companies do business. And because the financial model is changing, companies can afford to change the way they invest in information technology. And that is the insertion opportunity that you have if you're interested in enterprise software. Because if you can build it and you can create value, you're no longer requiring your customers to come in and take $1 million out and put it on the table for you to stay in business. As you can grow it, as I was saying earlier, as you gain a customer, you can invest to support the next customer. So here's a very small list of companies, many of them in California, some of them like Bozeman, Montana, right now is in the CRM business, for example. They started in Montana. I think it was 2.5 years ago, I was looking at companies such as this, and I thought, wow, Bozeman, Montana. These guys have figured out that they like to live in Montana. They started a software as service, an ASP business. They have a lot of core capability and competency on their management team. They're able to attract people to this Montana lifestyle, not unlike what we have in Santa Barbara. You like the beach, you want to learn about software as a service. We're one of the few games in town if you want to be by the beach and you want to work hard, software as a service. But if you want to go up to San Francisco, go to Salesforce.com, and there's a whole set of them across the business. And what's also interesting about this list is some of these companies are customers of each other. For example, we're a Salesforce.com customer, and Ultimate Software is a Citrix Online customer. And so what's happening is as these companies are growing, we're starting to do business with each other because our values are the same. Our value propositions are the same. We understand how we each other work. We like the idea as a company that's growing that we don't have to fork out millions of dollars in order to run our business. I like the fact that as I hire salespeople, I can just write one monthly check to Salesforce and give them complete access to the entire suite of applications we have to run our sales business for a nominal amount of money. $100 a month. And now that salesperson has complete access to all the information that's available to our entire sales organization. So it's very, very, very effective. And this is from ASPnews.com. There's probably a couple of hundred of these that are going on in the world today. Very interesting business model, and I encourage all of you to learn more about it. So I want to switch to a little bit about how you sell the proposition. Okay? So there are serious changes ahead, and changes that we're having to manage as we go through exiting the dot-bomb, as well as exiting the whole scandal around corporate scandals with Enron and MCI, WorldCom. And although there continue to be a lot of opportunities for disruptive innovation, as I was talking, they're also now in an environment where if you have dreams of building a company and going public, you also have to recognize that the regulatory climate has changed. We as a company here operating in Santa Barbara, we've been a privately held company until when? March 1st of this year. So we went from being privately held, managing our business, to be part of a publicly traded company. And Sarbanes-Oxley showed up at our door 6 months ago, right? I'll talk a little bit about it in a second. But this was the US government's approach to help you as a software company create transparency to your investors. And what that essentially does is it requires you to document a set of processes that as a private company you never dreamed you had to even think you had. And so what does it do? It creates risk in your ability to manage. It's more work for the people that already have a full-time job. So again, it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. It's about the people. So how do you do this as you grow? How do you ensure that people are able to do their jobs as well as operate in these complex environments that exist in the future? And frankly, I don't think it's going to get better, because from a compliance point of view, as companies grow, there's going to be more insight as to whether the Sarbox environment is helping or hurting, and then they're going to try and, if it's hurting, they're going to try and change it. And when they change it, they create more risk. If it's helping, then they're just going to ask you to do more of the same. So as you heard from the opening, I grew up selling. Selling was my career. It's my history. It's what I know. And when I think about running the business, I like to go back to why customers buy. And first, you have to have a great product. You have to have a great product. And Klaus and his team have built 3 great products. And I was fond of saying, in fact, when we were going through the due diligence with Citrix, I was fond of saying that I had the greatest job in Santa Barbara, which I was running a sales organization with at the time 2 great products. We were growing. We were hiring salespeople. I was living in Santa Barbara. I mean, how much better is this going to get? Well, then I became the president. I thought, wow, this is cool. Now we have 3 great products. We're growing. We're profitable. We're living in Santa Barbara. So I just got to keep it going. But it goes back to the business issue, right? It goes back to the business issue. And creating value with the customer, who really has ultimate power, right, because they sign the check, and understanding the plan to deliver on it will only work if you understand the business issue. Because customers only buy to solve a problem. They, just like the rest of us, they buy to get out of pain, right? It's a classic symptom, right? I'm in pain, I have a problem. If you can solve it, and it is true to my business issue, and I can confirm it, I will pay you money to get me out of pain. That's why people go to the doctor, right? I'm in pain, I will pay you money, get me out of pain. Customers are the same way, but it has to be the business issue. And the reason it has to be the business issue is if it doesn't solve the business issue, you are replaceable. And if you're replaceable, somebody else will show up and they will solve the business issue. And so you have to become integral to your customer's business. If you aren't integral, if you are not indispensable, you do not have a sustaining, compelling proposition, in my opinion. What we did at Citrix Online and Expert City before is we created value through something Klaus calls SAFE. We deliver products that are secure, available, fast, and easy. when we introduced a new product, as we did on August 1st, called GoToMeeting, we entered a market that already had a wide range of online web-based meeting products from companies like WebEx, you may have heard of that, from Placeware, which was acquired by Microsoft. But we introduced something called GoToMeeting, and it met our values. These are our values. It's secure, it's end-to-end encrypted. That's a unique value in the marketplace. It's available. It's highly available. All of our software is available online greater than 99.99% of the time. Our operations guys wake up from pagers at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning to fix problems that they get notified automatically from the network. Okay, and I get notified at the same time, except I'm still asleep. Okay, goes back to the people. Not one of those guys ever comes into my office and says, I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because they love their job, because Klaus built great products, and although it's painful to wake up in the middle of the night, they fix the problem, they go back to bed, and it works. And it works because we believe in fault tolerance. It's what we do every day. Has to be fast. If it isn't fast, people won't use it. Right? How many of us used to use dial-up? Then what? We went to broadband. And now we're going, oh, can we get even faster broadband? Right? If it's not fast, you won't use it. And it has to be easy. And if you think fast is important, easy is everything. Because if it isn't easy, no one will use it. And how many of us have used applications that are just difficult to use? Or how many people have watched our parents try to do something that to us seems relatively easy to do, but they just struggle and they don't understand it and I don't get it and how do I do it? If it isn't easy, they won't use it. And you may have the greatest idea on the planet, but if people don't use it, it has no value. So one way that we describe how to go to my PC, how it works is we keep it simple. You go to our website, you log on, you get a list of computers you have access to, boom, you get access to your desktop. That's how it works. It's easy. And that's why people buy it. That's why we have over 150,000 customers using GoToMyPC. So managing for growth. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about alignment, process, and accountability. I borrowed these slides from a good friend of mine, Mark Palmer. Some of you may know him. And one of the things that you really have to look for when you're managing for growth is ensuring that you have a set of processes around all the different functions in your business, that people are accountable to running those processes consistently so you can expect and inspect what you expect. And then you have alignment to ensure that people work well together. You often hear companies talking about politics in the organization. Well, politics is really a function of people at the top unable to get aligned. And so the people that report to them lower in the organization cannot agree because the people up above don't agree. So when Klaus and I disagree on something, we sit down and we work through it. And sometimes we agree to disagree, but we agree on a path forward. Okay. Most times we agree and we create a path forward. But we do that so that the people that report to us and work with us are able to carry on their jobs. And so we have to work through the hard problems, so we're not asking our people to work through those problems, because they are not empowered to work through those problems. That's our job. Our job is to show up every day and clear away the problems so that the people that are trying to do a specific job, whether it's the guy that wakes up at 3 a.m. and gets the network back going, right, or it's the customer support agent who's answering the phone, they show up every day just trying to do their job, and we want them to succeed and excel in what they do. And without alignment, you cannot create that. And so there's a set of capabilities that occur, and the descriptors below these can change, but what's interesting about them is they are guideposts to what you need to do at each level. And so we've been talking about compelling proposition. How do you create value? That's about what you offer your customers. It's also what affects your competitive position. And despite, in our case, despite products that either may be less costly or available from companies that are bigger and may be perceived as successful, companies are coming to us buying our software. because we have a unique and valuable, compelling proposition. So it enables us to be competitive in the market. And we have a business model that's very scalable. We defer all of our revenue in what's called GAAP revenue accounting. It's generally accepted accounting principles. So when we get a new customer, if they sign an annual contract with us, we defer all the revenue for the next 12 months. We take it ratably over the life of that contract over the next 12 months. So what it does is it enables us to have tremendous visibility to our future revenue stream. So we know today, if we shut the lights off tomorrow, we know how much revenue we would make next year if we did not sell one additional customer. And that's because of our business model. And that's what delivering software as a service enables you to do. It takes time to build, but it's similar to the insurance business. Every new customer builds on the base, and it builds on the base, and it builds on the base. And it creates tremendous visibility that enables you to see into the future and plan much more predictably than you could in the more traditional enterprise software market, where you take a customer and you take all the revenue up front. Well, then the next day you got to start all over again. I got it all yesterday, now I have to start again today. And every day, every month, every quarter, it gets harder and harder and harder, which is why companies miss their earnings. So back in Q2, a lot of software companies missed because they couldn't convince enough customers to spend enough money in the Q2 timeframe in order for them to meet earnings expectation. But in our business model, and we're a division of a publicly traded company, so I'm not commenting on Citrix overall, but in our business model in the online division, we use GAAP revenue accounting, so we have a lot of visibility to the future, which enables us to make predictable investments to build our business as we go forward. Processes, in this case, selling processes. If you're going to go into this market and you're an engineer, you need to learn how to talk to customers. You have to understand what's important to customers. You have to help them understand what your vision is. One of the greatest salespeople we have in the company is sitting right over there. Customers love speaking to Klaus. Why? Because they love hearing his enthusiasm and excitement, 5 or 6 years later after he started the company. Because his vision is what drives us forward to creating new ideas and helping customers what's coming down the road. What happens if I become a customer? What happens if I do invest a lot of money in your solutions? What can I expect in the future? Where are you going? What technologies do you invest in? Where is this happening everywhere else? Where else is this happening in the market? And that's why they rely on the engineering team, and the salespeople rely on the engineering team to help us create that vision for the customers. Very, very important. And accountability. You have to determine what's relevant and what's important. And what I mean by that is you have to determine where you draw the line, whether it's with salespeople's behavior or whether it's with how you want your engineers to show up, whether you want them in shorts or flip-flops, whether you want them working all night or you want them to go home at some point and get some sleep, or whether you want the accounting people that have to work over Thanksgiving holiday because they got to close the books. You have to determine what is and isn't okay. And you have to stay consistent. I don't know how many of you have children. I myself have the fortune of having 2 children. I was able to get through 2 teenage experiences. And our philosophy was win the war, not the battle. Win the war, not the battle. Okay? If you're going to be late, call. Right? I'll come and get you anytime, anywhere, no questions asked, as long as you call. So you just got to figure out what are those rules. And those rules are very similar in a company as they are in a household. And then you got to manage to those. And you have to determine the areas that we spoke about earlier around selling proposition and solution. And standard terms and conditions is about setting your customer's expectation. And I'll give you an example in our business. When we sell to corporate customers, because we sell both online through our e-commerce site, like gotomypc.com and gotomeeting.com, and we sell to corporate customers through our sales organization and our indirect partners. Through our corporate sales, we only sell annual contracts. We only sell annual contracts. If you want to buy by the month, you go to our e-commerce site, pull out your credit card, and you can buy by the month. If you're going to be a big company and you want to buy from us, well, it's a full year commitment. You can pay us by month, by quarter, or you can pay us all up front. Okay, we'll give you that option. But we only sign annual commitments. Customers call me up and say, I only want to sign a 3-month contract. I'm sorry, we don't do that. But I want to do business with you. I understand that. But we only sign annual agreements. We do that because we know that the amount of time and energy and effort it takes us to sign up a customer, to get them working, right, activate them, to keep them as a customer for those 3 months, it's probably not worth having them as a customer if they're not with us for a year. So should we spend the time and energy and effort to keep them for 3 months when they're just going to bail on us? No, we'd rather move on. We'll go find a customer that does want to pay us for a year. And we found that to be very, very effective. Are there customers that have said, I won't do business with you because of that? Yes. But I can count, since I've been with the company, I can count on maybe one hand, possibly two, the number of companies that have said that. We have over 8,000 customers on the corporate side of our business that do business with us. So I think we've got a pretty good track record there. But you have to stay consistent, and you have to just set expectations as you go forward. And all these pieces enable you to balance your resource, create a level of performance across the business so that you can, again, plan as you go forward. So when you apply these to a growth engine, what essentially happens is you create this level of process regardless of the function you're talking about. And you have a level of accountability, meaning what you expect people to do, whether those are internal resources or customers, in order to do business with you. And typically what happens is people stop there, because doing more of that is, in their view, I'm just going to do more faster. More faster doesn't get you there in a scalable way, because you can only do so much with your own two hands. You can only get so far so quickly by doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? And this is where alignment becomes key, because what alignment does is it changes the dynamic. And alignment enables the organization to come together and think about new ways of doing things that are no longer more faster, they're dramatically different. We did that, it worked really well, it got us to this point, I'm really happy about that. Now we need to think about how we go to the next level. And that's something you have to do as a team. It's very difficult to do it individually. And if you can stop and take the time to go off-site, to spend a few hours out of the office and think about other ways of doing this, it will pay off immeasurably in your ability to grow and ramp your business, in our experience. And each of these pieces have different components associated with it. If you have accountability, you can predict your costs, because you know what people are going to do every day when they show up. If you have process, you know there's an ability to plan, because I know how I'm going to run through those different aspects of my business, how I'm going to collect for my customers, right? How I'm going to close the books, how I'm going to write code. Right? In every part of our business, there's a process. It may not be perfect, but there's a process. And we do our best to review those and understand them. And when the problem arises, because a problem arises, why? A problem arises because somebody else, typically in another department, is trying to do their job. And the process in that other department is causing friction or problems. And what does that do? That leads back to alignment. So if it causes the finance people to spend 3 more days trying to do something because the salesperson didn't do the contract properly, that's an alignment issue. It may also be a training issue. But there's typically a fundamental disagreement between the way things should be done. And if you can get ahead of that, then you get alignment and everybody starts working together. And when you do that, what you end up with is you end up with a process that drives predictable revenue. You end up with accountability that has predictable cost. And you create alignment, which enables you to predict how much money you can make. And when you can determine those 3 variables and you have those dials available, then you can scale. So I already mentioned briefly about Sarbox. I just thought I'd put up a quick background for you. Essentially, the objective is to create transparency for financial reporting purposes. As an example, as an officer, I have to certify our financials every quarter, both verbally and in writing. And that goes to the SEC. And I can assure you that anybody who signs contracts as part of their job takes that very seriously. So I think there are some very good things that have come out of this. Okay? It's a lot of work, and if you ever plan to participate in or be in a publicly traded company, it's just something to be aware of. And I think its intent to create oversight and transparency, I think, are being achieved. However, it has introduced a level of complexity that I'm not sure anybody could have predicted or understood until you got in it. So just as I close out, I'm a big fan of Abe Lincoln. One of the things that Abe Lincoln said was, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. And I strive to do that every day. The fact that I'm the president is just a title. I show up every day, trying to do the best I can and help the people in the organization move forward. And you have to ask questions, because most of the people that I work with are smarter than I am, and I like it that way because they're always thinking. They've got all this brain capacity, and it's going and going and going and going. And when I ask them a question, they've typically thought about it already. And often, they have 3 or 4 ideas to my 1 or 2. And so together, we have 4 or 5, and then we can pick the best one. And most of the times, and I'm pleased about this, they're not my ideas. So I really encourage you to learn to ask questions. Asking questions is everything, especially when, somebody's upset or they're frustrated or having a difficult time. Find out what's happening with them. Many times it has nothing to do with the job at hand. It has to do with maybe a personal issue or some frustration they have with a colleague or something else that's happening. Hire the best and smartest people you know. Whether they're referred to you, or they walk in your door, or they pick up the phone and they call you, take the time to speak to them. And it's one of the things before I joined Expert City, after I left OpenWave, I was in the market. I was in the market for a while. It was a terrible time to look for a job, never mind looking for one in Santa Barbara, which is a relatively small town. And I remembered what it was like when people wouldn't take my call. So I had this great track record, all this experience, and I thought, people are busy, right? So I really work every day that if somebody calls me, I'll do my best to take their call. I may not be able to talk to them right then and there. I have the benefit and fortune of having an executive assistant, but I'll ask her to either schedule some time on my calendar or ask the person to send me a brief note so I know what it's in regard to. And I really strive to try and make time for people that need help or are looking for opportunity. I may not have an opportunity for them, but I'll at least do my best to spend some time with them, because I remember what that was like, and I just try to live that on a day-to-day basis. You have to admit your mistakes, because nobody's perfect. And that's one of those things that, we all learned in kindergarten. And partnering is key, and I don't mean just in the company, I mean outside the company. Extend yourself out. Go out and meet other people. Go out and participate in the world around you. Everything does not happen in your office or in your cubicle or, in your home office. Things are happening outside that none of us are even aware of because we're so focused on the life we live and our problems and our daily machinations just trying to get through whatever that is for you, right? And so if you get out there, you'll learn a whole new world exists, and you'll see things that you didn't see before. And so I really encourage you to do that. And in the business world, partnering is everything, because there is not a successful company on the planet that has gone it alone. It is impossible today to be successful as a company without business partners, financial partners, other companies or individuals that are friendly to your proposition and what you have to offer. Family support is critical. If you have a family, whether it's your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your brother, your sister, your wife, especially for me, my wife, my dogs, my kids, their support is critical. If they're unhappy, my life is hell, right? I'm doing it for you, but you're not here to feed the dogs, okay? Think about that. Right? What you're doing is really important, and it's important to them too, but you need to take the time for them. And encouraging, your team to take time to regen. In our case, we give holiday and vacation time. I want people to take it because it gives you perspective. And perspective is one of those things, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you don't get away, if you don't take a walk on the beach or take a holiday or get out of the office, you're only as good as the environment that you live in every day, and the crusty coffee cup isn't going to give you any enthusiastic support. I spoke a lot about alignment, and I really believe that it either enables or disables your teams. And if you don't work through and drive through those issues and get ahead of them as the leader, then over time you will fail. It's only a matter of time. And lastly, on this particular topic of leadership, you have to determine what you want to stand for. Culture and values are everything. It's how people see you on a day-to-day basis. If they can come in and understand what you stand for, then they will know if they want to be part of your organization. And it is, in fact, those are the two items that retain people on a go-forward basis. I'm really pleased and proud to know that there are in excess, I believe it's 20 people in the company that have been with Citrix Online for over 5 years. And we've gone through a lot of growth, and we've been very successful, and we were acquired by a big company, and there's a lot of opportunity for people to leave and go do other things. And many of those people, Klaus included, have chosen to stay. And one of the primary reasons I believe those people have chosen to stay is because we stand for very specific things: a great place to work, we hire the best and brightest, we're open to new ideas, yes, we're growing, and all the things that go with growth are always good. We serve good food at parties, so people like that. But that's about our culture and values. People know when they walk into work, they know we expect them to work hard. And they do. And it will determine your success, in my opinion. So in closing, I've talked a lot about the history and what's happened over the last 20 years. Technology will continue to change. I cannot predict what it will be. You heard in my brief bio, I'm a marketeer, I'm a sales guy, I'm not an engineer. When I want to know what's happening in technology, I walk down and talk to Klaus. I do not have to be a technologist in order to lead the company, but I have to have a technologist standing beside me in order to successfully lead the business. And so determining who to surround yourself around is fundamental to being successful in this software market, because there are many, many complexities. There is too much knowledge and information to understand for any one person to be able to do it alone. The software market will continue to change. I believe it will change more towards companies delivering software as a service. I think more and more companies are going to move to this business model because it enables them to grow their business predictably. It enables them to defer the revenue so that they can tell Wall Street how they will grow, when they will grow, and deliver results on a predictable basis. It is just too difficult to grow companies at 20, 30, 50, 100% quarter over quarter, year over year, and not do that as a service in a predictable way. It's just too difficult to do it nowadays. And Wall Street is way too impatient to allow you to do that in the future, in my opinion. Customers will continue to drive purchases based on value. You have to really understand the truths around why people buy. And it's true for what you buy, whether you go buy a car or you buy a cookie or you buy a cake, it doesn't matter. If you walk away and you say, this is terrible, you won't buy it again. And so you have to deliver value. I don't know how many people saw Jerry Seinfeld. I will completely cream this, but Jerry Seinfeld was here last May, I think it was. And he talked about how close great and sucks is. You go ask somebody, did you go to that restaurant? They say, yeah, it was great. You ask the next person, they go, it sucked. Now, why were those so close? It's the same food. So great and sucks, based on the person's perspective, very close. Think about it in your own life. I thought it was very true. And your customers will demand the best from you. Customers force you to do things you're not ready to do. Your best customers force you to make decisions about your business you are not ready to make. And it happens time and time again. We had an experience. We did it about 6 months ago. We had a really big customer of ours come in on the corporate side, and they asked us for some functionality we weren't ready to deliver. And the customer said, I need this. This is really important to me. I've been your customer for 2.5 years. I continue to invest. I believe in you guys. I know where you're going, but I need this in order to run my business. It's fundamental. We added that functionality into our next release, which we released in October. We stopped, we listened. That customer forced us to do something we weren't ready to do. But we were smart enough, I'll give us that credit, to stop and listen. And we did it. And now that customer is hopefully a customer for life. They've been a customer for 2.5, going on 3.5 years, and I think we have at least 2 or 3 more years ahead. And they purchase every year again and again. They sign an annual agreement from us. They pay us in excess of $300,000 a year, every year. So that's an important customer. It's not the only one, but a very important one. So listening to those customers becomes important in the future. And ultimately, I believe it's the only way to create lasting value for your company, and if you're in the public domain, for your shareholders. So thank you very much.